11. Pay attention to detail. Lofty words and grand gestures can be suspicious. Why are you trying so hard to please? The details of a seduction, the subtle gestures, the offhand things you do, are often more charming and revealing. You must learn to distract your victims with a myriad of pleasant little rituals, thoughtful gifts tailored just for them, clothes and adornments designed to please them, gestures that show the time and attention you are paying them. All of their senses are engaged in the details you orchestrate. Create spectacles to dazzle their eyes. Mesmerized by what they see, they will not notice what you are really up to. Learn to suggest the proper feelings and moods through details. When we were children, our senses were much more active. The colors of a new toy or a spectacle such as a circus held us in thrall. A smell or a sound could fascinate us. In the games we created, many of them reproducing something in the adult world on a smaller scale, what pleasure we took in orchestrating every detail. We noticed everything. As we grow older, our senses get dulled. We no longer notice as much, for we are constantly hurrying to get things done, to move on to the next task. In seduction, you are always trying to bring the target back to the golden moments of childhood. A child is less rational, more easily deceived. A child is also more attuned to the pleasures of the senses. So when your targets are with you, you must never give them the feeling that they normally get in the real world, where we are all rushed, ruthless, out for ourselves. You need to deliberately slow things down and return them to the simpler times of their youth. The details that you orchestrate, colors, gifts, little ceremonies, are aimed at their senses, at the childish delight we take in the immediate charms of the natural world. Their senses filled with delightful things, they grow less capable of reason and rationality. Pay attention to detail, and you will find yourself assuming a slower pace. Your targets will not focus on what you might be after, sexual favors, power, etc., because you seem so considerate, so attentive. In the childish realm of the senses in which you envelop them, they get a clear sense that you are involving them in something distinct from the real world, an essential ingredient of seduction. Remember, the more you get people to focus on the little things, the less they will notice your larger direction. The seduction will assume the slow, hypnotic pace of a ritual, in which the details have a heightened importance and the moments are full of ceremony. Since time immemorial, women have known that within the most apparently self-possessed man is an animal whom they can lead by filling his senses with the proper physical lures. The key is to attack on as many fronts as possible. Don't ignore your voice, your gestures, your walk, your clothes, your glances. Some of the most alluring women in history have so distracted their victims with sensual detail that the men fail to notice it is all an illusion. From the 1940s on into the early 1960s, Pamela Churchill Harriman had a series of affairs with some of the most prominent and wealthy men in the world. Averil Harriman, whom years later she married. Gianni Agnelli, heir to the Fiat fortune. Baron Elie de Rothschild. What attracted these men and kept them in thrall was not her beauty or her lineage or her vivacious personality, but her extraordinary attention to detail. It began with her attentive look as she listened to your every word, soaking up your tastes. Once she found her way into your home, she would fill it with your favorite flowers, get your chef to cook that dish you had tasted only in the finest restaurants. You mentioned an artist you liked. A few days later, that artist would be attending one of your parties. She found the perfect antiques for you, dressed in the way that most pleased or excited you. And she did this without your saying a word. She spied, gathered information from third parties, overheard you talking to someone else. Harriman's attention to detail had an intoxicating effect on all the men in her life. It had something in common with the pampering of a mother, there to bring order and comfort into their lives, attending to their needs. Life is harsh and competitive. Attending to detail in a way that is soothing to the other person makes them dependent on you. The key is probing their needs in a way that is not too obvious, so that when you make precisely the right gesture, it seems uncanny, as if you had read their mind. Everything in seduction is a sign, nothing more so than clothes. It is not that you have to dress interestingly, elegantly, or provocatively, but that you have to dress for your target, have to appeal to your target's tastes. When Cleopatra was seducing Mark Antony, her dress was not brazenly sexual. She dressed as a Greek goddess, knowing his weakness for such fantasy figures. Madame de Pompadour, the mistress of King Louis XV, knew the king's weakness, his chronic boredom. She constantly wore different clothes, changing not only their color but their style, supplying the king with a constant feast for his eyes. Pamela Harriman was subdued in the fashion she wore, befitting her role as a high society geisha and reflecting the sober tastes of the men she seduced. Contrast works well here. At work or at home, you might dress nonchalantly. Marilyn Monroe, for example, wore jeans and a t-shirt at home. But when you are with the target, you wear something elaborate, as if you were putting on a costume. Your Cinderella transformation will stir excitement and the feeling that you have done something just for the person you are with. Whenever your attention is individualized, you would not dress like that for anyone else. It is infinitely more seductive. In the 1870s, Queen Victoria found herself wooed by Benjamin Disraeli, her own prime minister. Disraeli's words were flattering and his manner insinuating. He also sent her flowers, valentines, gifts, but not just any flowers or gifts, the kind that most men would send. The flowers were primroses, symbols of their simple yet beautiful friendship. From then on, whenever Victoria saw a primrose, she thought of Disraeli. Or he would write on a valentine that he, no longer in the sunset but the twilight of his existence, must encounter a life of anxiety and toil. But this, too, has its romance when he remembers that he labors for the most gracious of beings. Or he might send her a little box with no inscription, but with a heart transfixed by an arrow on one side and the word fideliter, or faithfully, on the other. Victoria fell in love with Disraeli. A gift has immense seductive power, but the object itself is less important than the gesture and the subtle thought or emotion that it communicates. Perhaps the choice relates to something from the target's past, or symbolizes something between you, or merely represents the lengths you will go to please. It was not the money Disraeli spent that impressed Victoria, but the time he took to find the appropriate thing or make the appropriate gesture. Expensive gifts have no sentiment attached. They may temporarily excite their recipient, but they are quickly forgotten as a child forgets a new toy. The object that reflects its giver's attentiveness has a lingering, sentimental power, which resurfaces every time its owner sees it. Finally, words are important in seduction and have a great deal of power to confuse, distract, and boost the vanity of the target. But what is most seductive in the long run is what you do not say, what you communicate indirectly. Words come easily, and people distrust them. Anyone can say the right words, and once they are said, nothing is binding, and they may even be forgotten altogether. The gesture, the thoughtful gift, the little details seem much more real and substantial. They are also much more charming than lofty words about love, precisely because they speak for themselves and let the seduced read into them more than is there. Never tell someone what you are feeling. Let them guess it in your looks and gestures. That is the more convincing language.